Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we are doing a deep dive into QUINSHON Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. He was selected 36th overall in the second round of the NFL Draft. Now, we'll talk about the landing spot. We'll go over some film, some of his attributes, some of his advanced stats, his fit in the team, some of the offseason moves, and finally, what we can expect from him and where we should be taking him in our rookie drafts. And so, like I mentioned, he was selected 36th overall by the Cleveland Browns. Now, when we think about his situation, it's pretty good. I'll go into the depth chart a little bit more later, but we really like the draft capital. It's barely outside of the first round. Running backs that were selected in this general range, in 2022, for instance, you had Breece Hall, who I believe was selected 36th, and we had Kenneth Walker, who I believe was selected 41st. So that gives you a reasonable comp as to some recent draft capital and some of the talents that we've seen go in this general range of NFL drafts. And I must say, it's actually also impressive because there were two first-round running backs. So it wasn't as though they were trying to reach on the best running back. He wasn't even the first running back selected. He was the third running back selected. And now we'll go into some of his attributes and some film here right now. Now, as we get into some of the film here, I wanted to describe him, right? So a couple of things. First of all, he is decisive. He looks for the hole, he finds the hole, he gets in. He doesn't just kind of scurry around the backfield trying to make something out of nothing. He's just going to try to get what he can. Now, one other thing about that is he's not necessarily the most creative running back. If it's not really blocked for him, he doesn't necessarily get it, but if it is blocked, he gets it every single time. He's also quite aggressive, not only in just picking a hole and going, he also is aggressive in that he seeks out contact and he wants to punish you with each and every carry he receives. And, he's one of those bigger backs where the longer and the more workload he gets into the game, the better he gets, and the more defenses just want nothing to do with him. He's also very physical, like I mentioned. He just breaks tackles. He has some of the best contact balance in the class. I would argue that players like, potentially Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty are a little bit better in that regard, but still very, very good and would have been the best in this past season's class by far, in my opinion. Now, he also has a solid receiving ability. He can be lined up outside, as you saw earlier. He can run the easy routes out of the backfield, but he can be used vertically down the field. He's a natural hands catcher, really doesn't deal with that many focus drops. And so I really think that he is going to be a true 3-down back in terms of his actual ability to be one. Now, we'll get into whether we think that is going to happen for sure once we kind of take a look at their depth chart and some of the other moves they made in free agency and the draft. And he has that 30.0 BMI that we really look for in terms of our running backs because we want our guys to be able to sustain healthy workloads where they get enough volume to produce for us consistently in fantasy. And not only has he not really had any issues with injuries like that, while also receiving a good bit of work, I think that's going to continue at the NFL level. And I think this guy is built to receive a ton of volume and thus produce high volume fantasy performances for us in fantasy football. Now that we've taken a look at some of his film, let's take a look at some of the hit rates with second round running backs from 2020 through 2025, right? And so I have it detailed out by year and then, total seasons played, how many of them they've been in RB1, how many have been in RB2, the percentages, and then some overall notes regarding these numbers. And so first we have DeAndre Swift in 2020 was selected 35th overall. In 5 seasons, he has not yet been an RB1, but has been an RB2 5 times. So that's a 0% RB1 hit rate and a 100% RB2 hit rate. If you got this kind of production from QUINSHON Judkins, sure, you might, be a little bit disappointed you didn't get one of these high-end seasons. But, a running back too is extremely useful, even, potentially as a third back on your team. Now, I think he is going to probably have at least one RB1 season in his career. But once again, there are far worse fates than having 5 RB2 seasons. Moving on to Jonathan Taylor in the same draft, selected 41st overall. In 5 seasons, he's been an RB1 3 times and has not yet been an RB2. So that's a 60% RB1 hit rate and a 0% RB2 hit rate. He's dealt with some injuries and that contract holdout. And so he's missed time in every season with the exception of 2. And so I really think that if you got this kind of production from QUINSHON Judkins, you'd be absolutely ecstatic, especially with the high-end season like we saw from JT in 2021. Moving on to Cam Akers in that same draft, selected 52nd overall. In 5 seasons, he has not been an RB1 nor an RB2, and so that's a 0% hit rate across the board. At the tail end of his rookie season and then a little bit after his massive injury, he did look pretty good, but he just wasn't ever able to stay healthy enough and produce a full season's worth of work. And so obviously you would hope he doesn't have a career like this, right? J.K. Dobbins, same draft, selected 55th overall. In 5 seasons, has been an RB1 0 times, but has been an RB2 twice. And so that's a 0% RB1 hit rate and a 40% RB2 hit rate. You'd hope his career is maybe a little bit better than this, but to be fair to Dobbins, just like with Cam Akers, he's had devastating injury after devastating injury. But, at the very least for us, if you are an owner, he did produce 2 RB2 seasons. Moving on to A.J. Dillon, selected 62nd overall in that same draft. Now, I was really never high on this guy. He's, I comped him to no big play Derrick Henry, essentially. Not quite that terminology, but he's really just Derrick Henry without all the aggression and chunk gains, right? And so in 5 seasons, he has not been an RB1, but has managed to squeak out an RB2 season. So that's a 0% RB1 hit rate and a 20% RB2 hit rate. That's better than Cam Akers, for instance, but you would definitely hope for better production from QUINSHON. And then in 2021, we had Javonte Williams selected 35th overall. In 4 seasons, he has not been an RB1, but has been an RB2 once. And so it's a 0% RB1 hit rate and a 25% RB2 hit rate. Just like with A.J. Dillon, you would hope to get more than what Javonte Williams has given us. But just like with J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers, he had a massive knee injury, a multi-ligament injury, and he just doesn't have the same burst and tackle-breaking ability that he had pre-injury. So it is pretty unfortunate. Then in 2022, we had Breece Hall selected 36th overall. In 3 seasons, he's been an RB1 once and an RB2 once. And so that's a 33% hit rate across the board. But to be fair to him, he did miss about half of his rookie season with that ACL tear. Prior to that, he was absolutely dominant, and he's looked pretty good for us since then. Also, producing an RB1 season, which we would like. I'd be fine with this outcome for sure. Then you have Kenneth Walker, selected 41st overall in the same draft. In 3 seasons, he has not been an RB1, but has been an RB2 twice, and so that's a 0% RB1 hit rate and a 66% RB2 hit rate. You'd be fine with that. With Kenneth Walker, he produces, some elite numbers from time to time when he's actually healthy. He's just struggled to stay healthy for the entirety of his season, which kind of hurts his end-of-season finish, but is a difference maker for sure. Same draft, selected 63rd overall as James Cook. In 3 seasons, he's been an RB1 twice and has not yet been an RB2. And so that's a 66% RB1 hit rate and a 0% RB2 hit rate. Now, in his rookie season, he just really didn't receive much work. So when he's actually been given the workload he's produced for us, you'd be ecstatic with this outcome. Zach Charbonnet, selected 52nd overall in 2023. In 2 seasons, has not been an RB1 nor an RB2. Now, it is important to understand that he was selected once again behind Kenneth Walker in Seattle. When he gets the workload with Walker out, he produces as an elite RB1 a good amount of the time. So really not fair to him. Obviously, you would hope Judkins has better volume and production for us than Charbonnet, but the context is important. It's not because he's a bum or anything. It's just the situation with him. And then Brooks, this past season in 2024, the Panthers actually traded up to select him after an ACL tear sustained in his final collegiate season. In 1 season, he was not an RB1 nor an RB2. Then he just retore his ACL, his second week into coming back from the injury at the latter half of the season. And so 0% at RB1 or hit RB2 hit rate across the board. You definitely hope for better from him than Jonathan Brooks has given us, but once again, with Jonathan Brooks, it's really injury and it's not talent, just like with a lot of these guys that haven't produced. Now, as far as the results here, 27% of these running backs had at least 1 RB1 season. So, a little bit better than a quarter odds. And then 72% had at least 1 RB1 or RB2 season. And so that's, roughly 3/4 odds that you get that at least. So at least you just generally aren't going to get nothing, right? 26% of total seasons here were RB1 seasons. Once again, about a quarter of the time, and 56% of total seasons were at least as an RB2, and so a little bit better than half of the time. Overall, these hit rates aren't quite that of first-round running back prospects, but in general, these hit rates are pretty solid, to be honest with you. Now, taking a look at some stats from NextGen Stats from NFL, as well as PFF, per PFF, Cleveland's run block ranking from this past season was 23rd overall out of 32 teams. Not the best. We'll go into some free agency moves they made along the line in a second here. In terms of their rush yards per game, their 94.6 were 29th in the NFL. Not particularly good. They dealt with the injury once again to Nick Chubb. That guy is the most unfortunate person probably in existence. Really good dude, great character, good locker room guy too. It's really unfortunate because he had such a dominant stretch for us in fantasy. I really hope he does return. Hopefully not to the Browns so that he could actually see some volume, but really good dude nonetheless. taking a look at their rush attempts, this past season they had the 28th most. Now, game script, you have Jameis Winston. You live and die by Jameis Winston, right? He has those ridiculous throws. He'll have, 4 touchdowns, but also have 5 picks in these games. Maybe a little bit of hyperbole, but nonetheless, he kind of forces them in, from time to time, wherever he's starting at least, into these negative game scripts. And so it really just didn't allow for much running of the football. I think that'll change a little bit this season. We'll get into that a little bit later. Taking a look at their team rush rate, their 35% was last in the NFL, which further goes to demonstrate what I was mentioning with the Jameis effect of, you kind of put your team in a hole sometimes with these interceptions. Now, taking a look at their team rushing touchdowns, they only had 8 this past season. That was 30th in the NFL. I definitely think with the arrival of QUINSHON Judkins, that changes. And I think he's a good bet, or at least a solid chance to get 8 himself, let alone for the whole team, right? And then their rush success rate of 37.9% was only 28th. And so, if you take a look at him in this offense from this past season, I think, to be fair, a lot of these numbers would be substantially better. But, the situation really last season was not very good in terms of both the actual blocking and the production from the backfield. So it really does make sense that they wanted to invest heavily in the running back position. Now, getting into some of their free agent acquisitions, how I mentioned they were 23rd overall in their run block ranking per PFF this past season? Well, they signed to Tevin Jenkins. Now, his 71.7 run block rating was good for 12th among all guards that played at least 20% of, I believe, about 1,300 snaps this past season. And so that is a significant upgrade to their guard room, right? Now, he's dealt with injuries throughout his career, so who knows about the viability of him playing an entire season, but nonetheless, getting the 12th best run blocking guard, at least per PFF, could not be a bad thing for him, at least, right? Now, they also got some depth with Cornelius Lucas, their offensive tackle. He may see some time at the beginning of the season, potentially. I don't think he's, particularly great, but it's better to have some depth than just picking guys up off the street mid-season, right? And so I definitely think, especially the signing of Tevin Jenkins is going to help the run blocking. And I think that also having a running back with the talent of QUINSHON Judkins is going to help them out as well, because he's generally going to pick the correct holes. And especially if he gets good run blocking, he is going to take advantage of it and make the most of it pretty consistently. Now, getting into their depth chart, their quarterback room, let's just begin with that. Who knows what to think, right? First of all, Deshaun Watson is not playing a snap. Their owner has finally publicly admitted, after years of us knowing, that it was indeed a mistake to give him a fully guaranteed contract. He has been one of the worst starting quarterbacks consistently since being given that contract. He had those accusations. Do we even have to say accusations? I'm going to stay with accusations, though, for the sake of this. Yeah, nothing burger with him. Actually, a net detriment to the team because of the cap hit. Now, with Joe Flacco, 2 years ago, he definitely gave us some good production in Cleveland. He helped to break out David Njoku, right? He's getting older, though, a little bit longer in the tooth, even by NFL standards for the quarterback position. If he plays this season, I think that could help the offense, but long-term, just really not going to be the guy due to age. Kenny Pickett, I think he's, a fine backup. I think he's probably a pretty good backup, to be honest with you. Just don't really see the upside. Definitely not the long-term option, in my opinion. Fourth, they have Dylan Gabriel. He was selected in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. Now, if he was, say, 6'1" or taller, I would have much higher hopes for him. Unfortunately, he's about 5'10", 5'11", right around there. And so just generally, that's such an outlier for size that it's going to be hard for him. He really does struggle to see over the middle of the field at times. It's really not his fault. What is he going to do about it? But, when he sticks to the structure of plays and plays on time, he's kind of like Tua in that he's a rhythm quarterback, pretty accurate as well. Not enough touch on or not enough velocity as I would like on some of these deep balls, and really not going to do very much out of structure, but he is also a pretty good athlete and good in the read zone option game. Then you have Shoutout Sanders selected in the 5th round. Now, he's not showing up on here because they only display the first 4 quarterbacks. Now, I will take my W with Shoutout Sanders. Now, I'm aware that probably some of why he slid in the NFL draft is due to the way he presented himself during the team meetings. We've all probably heard about the Giants story. Yikes. But, I was saying all along, I really just did not see what other people were seeing in Shoutout Sanders. Like, he's possibly the most accurate quarterback in the class. Just doesn't have any elite traits in any way, shape, or form. And some of his pocket ability in the sense of the drop depth for him, the dropbacks, was just concerning because he would make his tackles' lives living hell with him drifting backwards and backwards and backwards and not having the mobility to escape. I really don't think he's going to be anything either, to be honest with you. I think the long-term starter for the Cleveland Browns is not on the roster. Now, the running back room, this is good for Judkins. Now, Jerome Ford, he's the king of, getting 15 2-yard carries and then getting a 45-yard run at the end. And then you look at his yards per carry and you think, oh, he was relatively efficient. He was fine. He's going to be a nothing burger in this offense. QUINSHON Judkins selected 36th overall. He brings the power element once again with some receiving upside as well and decent in pass protection. Now, his running back mate in Dylan Sampson was selected in the 4th round. Now, other people were a little bit higher on him than me. Some people were saying 2nd round, more probably 3rd round. I had him ranked as a 4th round running back, and he did go in the 4th round. I think he's fine. He brings, a speed element that QUINSHON Judkins doesn't possess. And he's also a good receiver as well. So I definitely think that they can be a nice 1-2 back combination. And Pierre Strong is probably going to be a nothing burger as well. But I think he's right up there with Jerome Ford in talent. So I'm betting one or both of them probably makes the roster. Getting to the receiving room, Jerry Jeudy was the beneficiary of the Jameis Winston effect, where you get a ton of volume and he's not scared to throw to you, even if you're not open. I think Jerry Jeudy returns to being, that wide receiver 2 to 3 that we've seen before, but definitely a talented player. Cedric Tillman is a nice X as well. He, during that 3-week stretch, just like with Jerry Jeudy, with Jameis Winston, he was the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy during a 3-week stretch. That is what Jameis Winston does. We love that man. Gosh, I hope he plays for Malik Neighbors' sake this season. But yeah, Tillman's a fine X. Nothing incredible, but fine. They took a shot on Deontay Johnson. We'll see if he destroys the locker room with his presence. Does remain to be seen, to be fair. David Njoku and Harold Fannin at tight end. I think that Njoku's probably in his final season with the Browns. I think they're going to let him walk or trade him potentially. And I think Harold Fannin is the successor. I really like Harold Fannin. Getting to the offensive line, DeJuan Jones, Bitonio, Pocic, Teller, Conklin, and then Tevin Jenkins. I think that this is a group that is going to be able to help a little bit in the run game. Hopefully they can get some consistency. And if they see an injury to Bitonio or Teller, I think that Tevin Jenkins can step right in and be a very good run blocker. So I definitely think that the offensive line, with hopefully a little bit better quarterback play, is going to be helped out. And it's not going to be quite as easy for defenses to just focus on stuffing the run. So overall, I definitely think that there are much worse offensive environments. And I think if they could just get a quarterback potentially this next season, that sky is the limit for this offense. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Shack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. Now, let's dive further into his fit with the Browns. What did they think of him specifically? Well, they said he brings the brand of football that we want. AFC North, exceptionally strong, physical, tough, productive young guy. All those are accurate descriptors of QUINSHON Judkins, and I agree. That is exactly what you want in the AFC North. It gets cold, crappy outside in the dead of winter. You want the big running back that can bruise their defenses, tire them out, just make them give up essentially, right? And you want to be able to salt the game away and eke out these narrow wins because, especially towards the latter half of the season every year, it just isn't great weather to be passing the ball in very often. I mean, we see blizzards, right? Now, let's take a look at Cleveland's rushes in 2024 compared to what Judkins did, right? So, Cleveland had 258 gap runs this past season, which was 61% of their runs, and 164 zone runs, which is 39%. I think this matches what Judkins does well. I think he's both fine in gap and zone. In this past season, he had 111 gap runs, which was 58% of his runs, versus 82 zone runs, which was 42%. Once again, I think he's a good fit. I think they have an improved offensive line. I think, once again, the weather is going to kind of dictate things where towards the latter half of the season, when we want points in our fantasy championships, I think he is going to deliver for us because he is exactly the type of running back you want in these situations. A big, physical, dominant force that is going to plow through defenders and help salt away the game. And let's take a look at some advanced stats here from 2024 with Judkins at The Ohio State University. So I took a look at draft-eligible FBS running backs with at least 100-plus rush attempts as a sample size of 72 players here. Judkins received 193 attempts on the season. Remember, he did split work with Travion Henderson, so that's the reason for, not the incredible workload, but we've seen him hold up at Ole Miss for 2 straight seasons, so I have no worries about his durability by any means. Taking a look at his yards per attempt, his 5.5 were tied for 24th in the sample size. Not incredible, but fine. And there were quite a few players with, a 10th better in terms of their yards per attempt than him, so definitely not bad. His 3.04 yards after contact per attempt was tied for 49th. Not particularly great, but he is physical, and he is pretty good in short yardage situations. His breakaway run percentage of 41.2% was 21st. That's pretty solid as well. Taking a look at his PFF rushing grade, his 90.0 score was 9th in the sample size. He is a very good runner of the football. Once again, he's better when stuff is blocked for him than having to create himself, but when it is blocked for him, he is going to choose correctly 95% of the time. His PFF receiving grade of 72.3 was 11th. He is a very good receiver. Just because Travion Henderson is a better receiver doesn't mean anything in regards to QUINSHON Judkins' ability there. He does have the ability to be a true 3-down bell cow back, and I think that he very well could see that type of usage. Taking a look at his yards per out run, his 1.13 were 22nd. That's fine as well. His 69.3 elusiveness rating was 38th. He's not incredibly elusive, but I think he's fine. I don't think he's definitely not an easy tackle by any stretch of the imagination if you've seen any film on him. Taking a look at his missed tackles forced, his 43 were 25th. But keep in mind that was, the total being 43 isn't really representative of his capability because he was splitting work with Travion Henderson. And that was 0.22 per attempt, which is respectable for sure. Taking a look at his rushing yards and rushing yards per game, his 1,060 and 66.3 per game are fine. But once again, the context is important that he was splitting work with Travion Henderson. Same thing goes with the receiving game. He had 161 on the season, 10.1 per game. He's not quite as good of a receiver as Henderson, in my opinion, but I do think, once again, as I've said multiple times now, that he is capable of being a 3-down back, and he can be used vertically down the field as a receiver. We like that. But he did have 16 touchdowns, which is quite impressive when you contextualize that with him not having, the massive amount of work that he did see in his first 2 collegiate seasons. Now, what do we think about Judkins to conclude things here? Well, he's 6 foot, 221 pounds. That is a 30.0 BMI. That is perfect. That is the traditional bell cow mark needed, 30.0 or higher. He is an early declare. We don't particularly care quite as much with running backs, but, it's better to have a younger running back coming out, right? There's the potential for more longevity for sure. The NFL draft capital he received, and I thought he was deserving of, was a 2nd-round pick. He went a little bit higher even. I thought he might go in the 40s, so to be going 36th is fantastic draft capital. It's great. My comp for him, the low-end comp was actually Isaiah Pacheco, and my high-end comp was Kareem Hunt. I do think I would lean more towards him being early career Kareem Hunt, though. Kareem Hunt, if you remember, was very, very good as a runner, but also had that vertical ability to be lined up out wide in the receiving game. I think that Judkins is representative of both because they're both very aggressive, and I'd argue he's closer to Isaiah Pacheco in terms of the raw aggression that he displays on tape, right? My official grade was a 79.5 out of 100, which is the very top of the good running back tier, just a sliver under being a great running back prospect. What do we think we can expect from him potentially in fantasy? Where should we be taking him? So in a superflex setting in rookie drafts, I think he's a fine pick anywhere from the potentially 106 to 108 range. If you need running back, I would suggest trying to trade down if you're thinking about picking him a little bit earlier than that, but that's fine. In terms of where I think he should be going specific to the running backs in this class, I would definitely take Genty first. I would consider one of Tre'Von Henderson or Amarian Hampton. I understand with the first round draft capital with Hampton, also in that Chargers offense. I think that Tre'Von Henderson is more talented than Judkins, but I could definitely understand if you're looking for somebody with a little bit more probable durability that you could go Judkins, right? I think that Henderson has the ability to be extremely efficient with a Gibbs-like type of workload. I think he's just a better receiver and runner, even if he's not quite as big. But with QUINSHON Judkins, I do think he should be going ahead of running backs like RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey's 24 and a half right now. Now, we typically don't care about running back age that much coming out. I think, though, that with a significant age gap and better draft capital in a system where he should be running early and often, with the room for a huge quarterback upgrade and them investing in their offensive line, I think that Judkins, I would prefer him personally, but I definitely could understand if you took Harvey over him. I would not advise taking Caleb Johnson over Judkins. With Caleb Johnson, he just does not have the great receiving profile. They have Jalen Warren there to kind of steal some of those touches. Although I do like Caleb Johnson. Don't take that as a slight. But yeah, in single QB, I think he should just be going one pick earlier. I think the 105 to the 107, because you would take out Cam Ward, because Cam Ward probably in a 1 QB setting, due to the lack of probable rushing upside, probably isn't deserving to go ahead of him. Now, in terms of redraft leagues, I think anywhere maybe the 6th to 8th round. I think a lot of these rookies should be going right around this range, in my opinion, with the exception of, your Genties. But yeah, what do you think of QUINSHON Judkins? Do you think that he's worthy of, say, pick 5 or 6 to 8 in a Superflex league, pick 5 to 7 in a single QB? Do you think I'm a little bit too high, too low? Let me know below in the comment section. What do you think his max upside is? Do you think he has the potential to be a low-end RB1, mid RB1, potentially even elite RB1? Let me know below in the comment section. And once again, feel free to check out my Patreon. I would really appreciate your support. I love creating this content for you guys. Feel free to like and subscribe as well. I'd really appreciate it. And make sure you guys have an absolutely fantastic day. Thanks and see you again.